Good evening, this is Jack Bernicle welcoming you to a particularly rough and rugged edition of Off-Road magazine. Every weekend, ever since motorcycles were invented, thousands of off-roaders from around the globe, fanatics of every age and social standing, mount their motorcycles and get ready to take part in one off-road event or another. Whether it's love, passion, or in that particular case we've just seen, sheer stupidity, no one knows. A lot of times it's not exactly legal. Chances are it's extremely expensive, usually very strenuous, and often it entails great pain. Every off-roader has experienced it. You start taking more and more risks when you ride, until all of a sudden you've taken one too many and you're down on the ground. First you check to make sure you're all there yourself, then you make sure your bike's all right, and as the shock begins to dissipate, you hear yourself swearing that you'll be more careful in the future, and you are, at least for a little while. The fun and the pain threshold rises, the concept of giving up becomes something utterly foreign to you. This is the portrait of an off-roader, a heyday for a psychiatrist, especially around the campfire. In this month's edition, we'll be showing you the more excruciating side of off-road motorcycling sport. Many of the crashes are minor and of no consequence, even with an axe sunken into your helmet or your head. But that's not to say that no rider has ever really hurt himself badly. We're going to start out with an event that is one of the most strenuous, but which goes easy on the crashers, the Roof of Africa Rally in Lesotho, a country in southern Africa. It can easily be deemed the most grueling event in the world. The roof lasts 3 days, is 1,000 kilometers long, that's around 620 miles, and riders can't count on help from onlookers. They're on their own out there in the wilderness. Out of the 200 riders who start, sometimes less than 10 make it to the finish. Many tax themselves beyond their limits, overestimating their physical and mental capabilities. The World Enduro Championships in Oleana in Spain. Day one on a special stage and a crash for the Swedish 350 world champion, Kent Carlson. Followed by his countryman, Bill Anderson. And yet another Swede, Sven-Erik Jonsson, one of the most successful enduro riders of all times, but not at this particular moment. As usual, here on the Iberian Peninsula, the course is selective and challenging. The main problem, of course, is not to develop too great a love for trees, as this particular gentleman is finding out to his discomfort. If you yell hard enough, someone will come and help you out. The World Enduro Championship at Saint-Marcel d'Ardèche in France. Rain and muddy paths. Even stars like Italian Giorgio Grasso have a hard time keeping on the course at all. There's one thing about mud, it can be fairly soft to crash onto. Trees, of course, present different problems. Barely 2 meters high in dry conditions, this particular obstacle would prove no problem at all. This, however, is a different kettle of fish. The trees again. Frenchman Rubin has already tried it 5 times to no avail. He even seeks assistance for a 6th attempt. The result, all too painfully familiar, and he doesn't like it. Mr. Rubin's opinion of our cameraman. The World Enduro Championship at Vimmerby in Sweden. A tricky mud hole lies in ambush on a special stage in the middle of the woods. The seconds can tick vitally away when you're faced with a problem like this. Even future world champ Giovanni Sala from Italy runs into difficulties on his KTM and loses his lead as precious seconds tick by. Grimmerby, of course, has a spectacular sandy motocross circuit, which doesn't include quite such nasty little obstacles as this. It will be interesting to see how the world's best motocross riders would deal with it. It's certainly a fairly painful experience for the world's best enduro boys. Oh, of course, the trees again. Near the end of the special stage. And the mud's getting worse, the water's getting deeper. They have a special stage at the end, and here's our old friend Bill Anderson, almost crashing and heading off into the woods. It must be a sort of intuitive family affair, because this is Bill's brother, Bert, not getting quite as far. World Championship in Kielce in Poland, and this is our zappy 1990 World 125 champion Paul Edmondson, about to end his 1992 season with a broken collarbone. Spectacular fashion from the little Midlander, who, despite having the collarbone pinned after this high-speed flip and riding bravely again the following week, lost his World Championship that year. But he bounced back to win it again in 1993 and 94. An enduro world round in Andon, southern France. Here, a trials club drew up the course, a fact that is clearly reflected through the technical demands on the riders, which I think would have demanded probably trials bikes rather than enduro bikes to get through here. And probably a little bit of trials finesse as well. This is Otakar Kochba, at the time world champion in the 350 class, proving that if you haven't got a 10-foot left leg, then it's no good falling over on your left side when the ditch is that deep. Never mind, try again. This is Kochba about to try again. Watch him in the distance. Does he have a lever? Has he grown a long left leg? No, he hasn't. And back into the bushes he goes. There is a man under there somewhere. This insanity doesn't only take place sur le Continent. We go to the beautiful setting of Radar in mid-Wales. The course for a British Enduro Championship round, extremely slippery with intermittent mud holes the whole way through. British Enduro Championship rounds usually last 2 days, and on many of them, many Enduros are held during the course of any given season in Wales, enjoying the absolute sweetness and joy of deep, bottomless Welsh bogs. These guys showing us a few examples of how not to deal with them. The main thing is to keep the front end light, but that takes a brave man to do it. These events include the famous Welsh 2 Days Enduro round Llandudno Wells, which attracts clubmen from all over the British Isles and a lot also from the continent, who want to come and sample these absolute delights of Welsh forests. Oh, he's obviously a friend of Monsieur Rubin's. This fellow looking a little more friendly towards the long-suffering cameraman. Now there's one way of trying it. Just step off the bike, lighten the load, and she'll manage to get through without you. Back again to Kielce in Poland for another look at the venue where Britain's world champ Paul Edmondson crashed so spectacularly back in 1992. It's a little wetter now. Perhaps little Ed wouldn't have had quite such a major crash as he did before. The problem with water like this is how do you find the line that'll work? This is Giorgio Grasso. He has a lot of experience over the younger enduro generation. Notice the way that Giorgio steps off it, lifts up that front wheel and manages to find a way through. This is the other way of trying it. Wait for the cry of anguish. Yes, that poor man knows that unless your waterproofing is truly exceptional, once your engine stops in water this deep, it's liable to stay stopped. Remember, people are doing this mainly for pleasure. There's our friend number 43, still stopped. Here's a Kawasaki being emptied out. Oh, and here's a man proving the worth of having an incomplete rear mudguard. There's an illustration of why motorcycles have a rear mudguard fitted to them, especially when they're going through 4 feet of water. And here's an illustration of why they have a gearbox. This poor fella is opening the throttle wide, but he's not actually in gear, so the rear wheel isn't turning around at all. The bike simply, gently sinks. I have a friend called Tony Moranka. He used to do this for fun in Welsh Enduros, week in, week out. He worked at a very successful advertising agency in London, and as Tony puts it, they used to wonder why he used to go back in on the Monday morning and was actually incapable of walking properly till about Wednesday. And they'd say, are you really trying to tell us that you enjoy what you do and what you go off and play at weekends? Well, this is the sort of thing that Tony enjoyed. And this is a fellow who's given up. He'll be back into work tomorrow morning, telling them he didn't have a very good weekend. Notice the capacity for the rear wheel to sink the more that you wind the throttle on. Another example with a long-suffering Swedish Husaberg. Whoa, stop it, man. You're going nowhere. This is the legendary Czech enduro god, Kundenlik. He's ridden his share of tough enduro tracks through wooded terrain back home. Now notice his technique, which is actually, in the end, when things look absolutely hopeless, lift that front end and also be fairly gentle on the throttle. Caress the throttle. He even steps off the bike and just gently feathers the throttle to just tickle the motorbike out of this sea of unforgiving liquid that he's descended into. And eventually his 610 cc's of thundering Husqvarna engine begin to respond. Lift her up, treat her like a baby. Well, we'll leave you from this merry mess for a moment, but we'll be back in a couple of minutes' time. Check, and we go from the mud and water of our previous little setting to the 6-day international enduro in Australia, hard riding through the dusty bush under the eyes of legendary spectators like this Harley-Davidson freak, where fans seem to have developed a particularly perverse delight in crashes. You know it makes sense. The International 6 Days Enduro, incidentally, takes place every year in a different country with teams representing each nation. Dust clears and, oh dear, he's still there. On a fast section of a special stage, the Italians, who, believe it or not, are hardly qualified in this type of riding, end up having the hardest time. This is Arnaldo Nicoli presenting us with the absolutely perfect face plant as he hits this unpleasant little ditch. Notice the charming way in which the handlebars fit perfectly into his hips and fling him over the front of the bike. This is Giovanni Sali. Well, that was a brave attempt. Ride hard, fall hard. He doesn't let go of the throttle. The engine stays running, and Sala, a world champion, is up and gone. Take a look at it again in slow motion. Whoop, here comes the ditch. Let's try and get over it. Ooh, but don't let go of that throttle. That right hand stays pinned. Even though he crashes out at the end, he takes first place overall. This is world champion in the 250 class, Giorgio Grasso. And another old hand. Don't let go of that throttle. He too keeps his hand on the throttle grip. Force of habit keeps the engine from stalling. A typical reaction among the top riders. Grasso again in slow motion on the Kawasaki. What's remarkable is the speed with which these guys recover and head off again. Now we take a look at the Gilles Lallet Classic, a brutal enduro test near Limoges, one of the toughest of its kind in the world. Only an elite few ever see the checkered flag, and if it weren't for the thousands of enthusiastic French spectators who are more than happy to help a rider out, there would likely have been more than a few years where nobody finished at all. A special stage, snow. Under these circumstances, even a top rider like Alain Olivier could lose his balance. Very prettily. This event is held in memory of the popular French enduro star Gilles Lallet, who died in the Paris to Dakar rally a few years back. In 1995, it ruined Paul Edmondson's season when he broke his fingers, but he bounced back to lead the 250 World Enduro Championship as we speak this year. Notice the steam from a long-suffering engine. And here we have a great display of feet pinned to the foot pegs, weight over the back wheel. A really superlative display of motorcycling skill with a particularly cruel slow-motion ending. Deserved better. Oh, a deeper ditch than we thought there. We move to the Baltic Cup in Germany. At Kaltenkirchen, a popular sand race held north of Hamburg. A motocross test at the end of the day. Danger looms as a course marshal waves his yellow flag over the clear side of the course after a crash by a Swedish rider. We see it again in slow motion. Olsen, the Swede, crashes out. Hesitant reaction on the part of the official standing on the right. He's not going to risk his skin by running onto the track. He'll just hold up his yellow flag across the clear side of the track. Two riders squeeze past, but the luckless Finnish rider doesn't. Over he comes, down he goes, and over he goes. 265 pounds of motorcycle right in the kidneys, and next thing he knows, the poor bloke's on his way to hospital. And here's the World Enduro Championship in Switzerland. This is Lubomir Wojkowka taking a truly spectacular fall. Over a tabletop, he begins to realise he's done it wrong. He's fallen a bit short. The rear suspension rebounds, and that's a really spectacular loop over the handlebars for Lubomir. He certainly named the right name. Here we have Bill Anderson again. All 220 pounds of him, knocking himself unconscious over the same jump. Bill gets this well wrong, lands short. Again, watch the suspension. 12 inches of it. Soak up the bump, rebound, and fling the poor man over the front. The World Enduro Championship at Figueira da Foz in Portugal. The Portuguese are famous for their beautiful beaches and their challenging enduro trails. This is no exception. Here's the world champion in the Tidler 80cc class, another Italian, Gianmarco Rossi. Not quite world championship style, really, Jean. Could it be that these rocks would demand a little bit more than 80 cc's for a comfortable crossing? Well, that was rather nicely done. Wrestle my bike into this hole. Here's a Spanish gas showing quite good form at this moment in time. Well, he had the speed, but not quite the bravery. And now we go to the Tunisian Rally back in 1993 to see the tremendous style of former world motocross champion Heinz Kinnegadner on his KTM. That's Heinz Kinnegadner. Tremendous 6'4" double world motocross champ back in 84 and 85, now a star of the rallying world, but occasionally prone to nail the throttle in that fashion that motocross diehards find so hard to give up, and in this case, which didn't quite work out for him. From Kinney, we move on to an enduro at Kiedson in Poland for a quick check of a special stage going wrong. Then a very wet Enduro World Championship round at Schoppen in Germany. How's this for style? This is the Finn Kempeinen. We see it once again in slow motion, and we can enjoy just how deeply he sinks his head into the water. The helmet must have been well filled with a chilling bowl of muddy water by the time he finished that little operation. Hang on to the bars and pull your head back out quickly before you drown. Another little risk of the Enduro world. The World Enduro Championship at Hradec in the Czech Republic. The Czechs have a reputation for drawing up a tough course. This would be a fast descent, but it's raining hard and conditions are a bit slippery. Tullio Pellegrinelli crashes out. Giorgio Grasso just manages to steer around him with a little help from Pellegrinelli's fallen corpse. And it just goes to show that even the top riders have a hard time on a descent like this. So imagine what it's like for the lesser lights. Again, the trees prove us an unbearable attraction. And how's about this for formation sliding? Well, the man disappears, but the bike's still there. The motocross test was an especially challenging stage, not just because it was saturated and almost impossible to ride, but also because it was no easy matter to find your way through all the chaos. Never mind stay within the time limit set. Enduros, of course, run between checkpoints where you have to arrive on time. It's when you're faced with conditions like this that it becomes a particularly cruel demand. Well, this is Jack Bernicle bidding you a brief farewell from this cheerful chaos. Join us again in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Bodycheck and a hair scramble in Hungary. This is an off-road experience for amateurs, a race even. For top riders, this would be a cakewalk, but for less experienced riders, it can be quite a challenge. Especially when they don't keep away from one another. What did you go and do that for? Hair scrambles originated, incidentally, in the deserts of North America, but they've spread to Europe and now flourish in countries all across the continent. This nasty little hill with a very, very short run-up proves to be a bit of a showstopper from these hardy amateurs from Hungary. I just think he'll probably be working behind the counter of his local Barclays Bank tomorrow morning if he survives this. Here we go, UFO. Presumably in this case standing for unidentified falling object, perhaps. We turn to the World Enduro Championship round at Jämsä in Finland, where just for a change it had been raining hard and we had a few rather wet crossings and a fair amount of mud. And once again, that perennial question of how you keep the weight off the front wheel, especially when you join your friend at a standstill in a rather deep brook. The problem with water, of course, when you're on a motorcycle is you never know how deep it's going to be. You can't see the land in front of you. Your front wheel and even your rear one have a tendency to vanish. Even when you think you can see the land, it's not always quite as unyielding as you hope it might be at the time you enter it. Those bushes keep getting in the way. And, of course, those trees. We go on to a test field in Hungary, at Goring. The rider on the left side demonstrates what can happen when your side stand falls down. Same effect as an ejector seat, really. In slow motion, notice the prop stand just beginning to drop. Ready to flick the bike off to the left-hand side. And now we go to the World Enduro Championship in France, in Servier-la-Château, where the weather started nicely, but rains during the event. And here we have luckless world champion Gianmarco Rossi once again having problems even on the starting ramp. Doesn't look like it might be a very good day for this particular Italian. In fact, the mud causes problems for many, many riders, and 50% of them end up retiring on this particular day. When the ruts get that deep, it's almost worse than water. Might as well just go back and try again. And here we enjoy the roar of anguish as machine pins man to a tree. At the end of an arduous day, we see Gianmarco Rossi again. He thinks he should have stayed in bed today, perhaps, but there again, it's sheer bloody-minded determination that makes world champions, even on 80cc motorbikes.
Wie schalt's von der Höhe?
We move to a different sort of off-road event, hill climbing at Mölln in Austria. This event is the first of its kind here in this country. It may not be as rough and challenging as in other places, but it is entertaining to watch, if a bit dodgy for some of the spectators at times. This is another sport that was imported from the States, where they specialize in building monster motorcycles to get up awesome hills. Here, most of the machines are motocrossers, and most of the spectators are frightened. Or at least uneasy. The riders too, by the looks of it. A spectacular eject there. Out of the way, boys and girls. And what catches your eye here in Mölln are the Michelin men, those stout fellows who really put profile tyres and engine power to the test. Not to mention gravity. There you get some idea of the sheer height this scaling. This man reaches quite a respectable distance. There is no way he's going to let that elderly KTM loop out, but it surely does, despite the chest against the bars technique. The let's go back and start again technique. And the let's go for virgin grass technique. But even the grassy line, welcoming though it may seem, doesn't help. He's still bouncing. And that's a brave and loudly applauded attempt. And once again, the slow, steady progress of number 22 on the old KTM. But he's about to project, he's about to fire the ejector button. Now we see it from a different view. Now, wait for the eject button. But the question is it how far the man or the machine goes up the hill? We await the judge's verdict. Well, that brave attempt to hang on to the bars like we saw the professionals doing earlier, as opposed to just let the thing go straight away. Now, all the latest gear, the helmet, the graphics, the designer attire, and the same end result. But he's well pleased with that. He got further than the exit. Now let's take a look at that from a different angle, and you can really appreciate how the motorcycle exploded. It's a good job we didn't have fans on that particular side of the road. They call him the Waltz King, a 500 Honda. Horses for courses doesn't always help. Number 145, notice the brave, brawny forearms about to get sweetly skinned in a passing tree. And yet again, the YZ Yamaha suffering from sheer lack of revs until he's going downhill. Horses for courses again, and this brutal 500cc Honda almost makes it. Showering our camera lens with dust. Another camera angle shows just how close he was to making it over the brink. And we leave him in that position. Rejoin us again in a few minutes for more action. Bring you back to Bodycheck. Austria is one of the many homes of the off-road rider on the continent. Here are a few painful impressions of the Erzberg Challenge event. Be careful where you park. A fine use to put your local quarry to. We believe you. Things have gone well for our brave local hero. Full hole across this sort of firm-looking riverbed. If only it weren't for this mud hole. Keep that throttle on. His cruel, cruel friends from a higher, drier grandstand enjoy the succulent spectacle. Right now, home must feel like a very, very long way away. We move to the World Enduro Championship at Pont de Salar in France. It's raining once again. Surprise, surprise. The special stage is one huge mud field. But people are still having a lot of fun thanks to Oscar Nacional, the wild and crazy enduro freak from San Remo. There's nothing he won't do to give his idols a hand. Enduro is his life. This is Oscar showing them the hot line and helping when they don't find it. He may not be that strong, but when it comes to moral support, he's the greatest. graceful little limbo. Looks more like Oscar's holding onto the bike than helping to push it. More encouragement. Go, go, go. So let's salute Oscar Nationale, enduro freak from San Remo, and move on to the Battle of the Kings in Hungary, where off-road champions of various disciplines vie for the crown. This is Giovanna Sala, world enduro champ, nutting a tree as he loses a little bit of precious time, but thoroughly enjoys himself trying to find the gravel road. And this is another world enduro champion, the 350 champ Anders Eriksson, pushing his Zuckerberg to the limit and beyond. A classic high side. and a very annoying one. This is Arnaldo Niccoli giving it all he's got until the crucial moment when he hits the turn. And this is Belgium's 35-year-old, 5 times world motocross champion, the great Georges Jobet, on a KTM, finding out that enduro territory is, well, foreign to him. So were those trees a few moments ago.
Hey, I cannot go out. Never I can go out there.
Yes, George is stuck there for life. Meanwhile, we move to the island of Elba, where Napoleon was sent into exile. It's also host to the Rally Transitalia, the Off-Road Challenge, and the Swiss National Enduro Championship. We wonder perhaps if Napoleon would have enjoyed this sort of highly personalised warfare with machines and country. It might have been right up his street. This particular climb wasn't quite up this guy's street, so he decided to bail out. And now the Tunisian rally once again. Desert rally riders are no wimps when it comes to taking their share of risks and the hard knocks that go with them. But this kind of riding has led to some very hairy accidents, and that was when the fun suddenly turned serious. Crashes like this have led to great riders like 3 times world motocross champion André Malherbe being badly injured, but factories pay big money for victory. Thankfully, however, the consequences of spectacular falls like this are not always so serious. At the end of our series of crash-out images, we now come to the crash event to end all crash events. The legendary hill climb Rachau of 1995. The onlookers get the show they came for, the drivers have their action, the spare parts industry comes away with enough orders to last them until the end of the century. As for us, we get pictures which we are passing on to you, so sit back, let these men astound and amaze you. This is probably the shortest amount of time you can actually enjoy riding an off-road machine. Enduros, of course, last for many hours. And with this hill climb, you probably can fit in perhaps, at the most 20 seconds before you simply send your motorcycle into a state of potential orbital destruction. Off-road team is always on the lookout for kooky, flipped out, insane or just plain extraordinary off-road events anywhere in Europe. So if you know of anything of the sort, please don't hesitate to let us know. On screen, our fax number in Switzerland. Tell us where and when and give us a brief summary of what it's all about. Our thanks in advance. For action as potentially daft and awesome as this. That was a perfectly presentable motorcycle a few seconds ago. Whatever you do, watch your motorbike once you've fallen off it, because it might just be intending to eat you. Yes, it's the unidentified falling object once again, transferring his attentions to Austria. And that's Michelin Man once again, showing us his spectacular style and on a slightly more modern KTM. Man and machine in perfect harmony. A form of formation dancing. No good getting upset about the damage you're doing, my boy. Can you run faster than your motorbike? That is the question. Yes, sir, especially when I'm going downhill. It's no good trying to catch it, son. Well, the motocross bikes can't make it, the enduro bikes can't make it. What about the trials bike, ridden by the star of the local bar? No? Looks like not. A panic-stricken exit. Yes, he's seen it all before. There's an air of tragic predictability on this sequence of assaults on this venomous hill. But just a minute. The higher you get, the harder you fall. If I hold on to this long enough, I know I can stop it. I can beat gravity. Oh, perfect. The perfect flying W. Now you've seen it. How you can almost go over the front of the handlebars up a 1 in 2 hill. A gallant attempt from a little snappy 125. So much for the crashes, pain and suffering this particularly insane corner of the off-road scene has offered. We hope you enjoyed it. No need to feel guilty, because off-roaders can laugh about their own mishaps just as easily as they can laugh about the next guy's blunders. Campfire talk is proof of that. Crashes are a part of life for every off-roader. So we wave a novel goodbye to Bodycheck, with thanks, of course, to our host Gunter Meyer for compiling such a rowdy roundup of biking mayhem.